Good morning. Today we are announcing the filing of felony charges arising from an incident in 1994 in the community of Thousand Oaks. Before Sheriff Fryhoff and I go into the details of that alleged offense, I want to take an opportunity to introduce all of you to SW. She will be going by her initials only. She will courageously provide a statement to all of us. Thereafter, she will leave the press conference and not take any questions. We respectfully ask that you abide by her request for privacy. Earlier this summer, DA investigators visited SW, and they informed her about a dark chapter of her past, a traumatic one that by the news itself had been ripped open. Undeterred, SW told DA investigators that she wanted to go forward and make sure that her alleged attacker was held accountable in Ventura County and that justice would ultimately be pursued. It is my honor to introduce you to SW.
Good morning. In 1994, I was brutally victimized by a man I didn't know in Thousand Oaks. Turns out, I was not his only victim. When he was sentenced in Los Angeles County to 102 years in prison for his attacks on other victims, I believed that he would serve the rest of his life in prison. For that reason, I was willing to agree that his case in Ventura County be dismissed because I believed justice had been served. A few months ago, when investigators from the Ventura County District Attorney's office contacted me, I was shocked to hear not only that this man was walking free, but he'd been out of prison for 6 years. The justice that I and his other victims deserved was denied when he was only required to serve a fraction of the sentence he earned. I am thankful to have this opportunity to now seek justice for myself and for his other victims. I am here on behalf of other victims of sexual assault to let them know that they are not alone and that they matter. I want to thank the District Attorney's Office and the Sheriff's Crime Lab for the work on my case, and so many others. And this case shows the value in making sure that every victim's sexual assault kit is tested and that offenders are held accountable no matter how much time has passed. Thank you.
Good morning. First, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to recognize the survivor in this case, SW. Thank you for having the courage and to stand before all of us today and speak publicly about what happened more than 30 years ago. I know that coming back and reliving something so traumatic is incredibly difficult. Out of respect for our victim, we had made the decision and the arrangement to have her leave before we reveal the suspect's photograph. She will also not be taking any questions, as the DA had said. This here is our suspect, Michael Douglas Brambles. Today we are here to announce an arrest in a case that happened more than 3 decades ago. This is a case that demonstrates the importance of perseverance, the value of preserving evidence, and the fact that justice does not have an expiration date. On April 19th, 1994, the victim known as SW was working alone at her business in Thousand Oaks when she was confronted by an armed suspect. What followed was a violent and traumatic attack that changed her life forever. The suspect entered into her business while she was alone. He held her at gunpoint, kidnapped her, restrained her, and sexually assaulted her before robbing the store and fleeing the area. At that point, the victim broke free of her bindings, locked herself in a storage room, and called 911. Our deputies arrived within minutes and treated this case with the seriousness it deserved. They secured the crime scene, conducted an extensive investigation, canvassed the area for witnesses and potential video evidence, and more importantly, collected DNA evidence. I want to take a moment to recognize the investigators and forensic scientists who handled this case. They were the real MVPs in this investigation. They carefully preserved the evidence that from that night, that decision was made more than 30 years ago, would ultimately become critical to this investigation. It was later learned SW was not the only victim. Brambles had committed similar crimes in Los Angeles County. He was convicted and sentenced to 102 years in prison. At the time, SW had every reason to believe that her perpetrator would never walk the streets again. That was not the case. Fortunately, due to the Ventura County Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, otherwise known as SAKI, our crime lab partnered with the Ventura County District Attorney's Office to review and retest all sexual assault cases using modern DNA technology. The decision to carefully preserve and protect the evidence sample that was collected over 30 years ago made it possible to revisit this case. SW's sexual assault kit was submitted for advanced testing, and the results provided investigators with critical information. It was discovered that Brambles had been released from custody approximately 6 years under elder parole laws. As you can imagine, this was devastating news for SW. The man she believed would spend the rest of his life in prison had been released. But today we are here with different news. As of yesterday, the person responsible for these heinous crimes is behind bars. District Attorney Erik Nasarenko will have more on yesterday's arrest and his criminal history in just a moment. I want to take a moment to recognize our Forensic Services Bureau, our investigators, our partners at the DA's office, and the Federal Department of Justice Bureau, and the funding for SAKI, which helped make this case possible. Funding programs like SAKI give law enforcement the resources necessary to revisit cases that have been gone unsolved for decades. We need to continue investing in these programs. Yesterday's arrest is proof that this funding can make a difference. To the survivor in this case, your courage to come forward again, to face what happened to you, and to seek justice has helped renew this investigation and make it possible. You should not have to do this. 102 years should mean 102 years. Elder parole, which was created and signed in our legislature and signed by our governor, allows people to walk long before their sentence is served. This is unacceptable, and it's a travesty to victims everywhere. One last thing. If you recognize this man, or if you believe that you may be a victim of this person, Michael Douglas Brambles, please contact the Ventura County District Attorney's Office. I will now turn it over to District Attorney Erik Nasarenko, who will provide additional information on the suspect and arrest.
Thank you, Sheriff Fryhoff. Today, we are announcing the filing of felony charges against ex-LAPD detective and convicted rapist Michael Douglas Brambles for the 1994 kidnapping for robbery of SW in Thousand Oaks. Brambles was arrested yesterday in the city of Santa Maria without incident by District Attorney investigators, with the assistance of the Santa Maria Police Department. He is currently being held in Santa Barbara County Jail on $2 million bail, and he will be transported today to the county of Ventura. We anticipate that he will be arraigned either later today or more likely tomorrow in Ventura County Superior Court. The criminal complaint alleges that Brambles kidnapped SW for the purpose of committing a robbery while personally using a firearm in the commission of that alleged offense. We also allege in the criminal complaint the following. Brambles' crime involved great violence when he allegedly forced the victim at gunpoint to the back of the store and sexually assaulted her. We also allege that Brambles took advantage of a particularly susceptible and vulnerable victim, one who was completely alone at her gift boutique store at or near the time that store was closing. Further, we allege that the defendant exercised planning and forethought, entering the business not only armed with a gun, but also carrying binding equipment. As with every case, and as with each criminal defendant, he is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. If convicted of all of these charges and special enhancements, he faces a maximum of 12 years to life in state prison. We could not charge Brambles with the sexual assault due to the statute of limitations. But evidence collected from the crime scene 32 years ago was instrumental in identifying SW's alleged attacker and bringing us to today's arrest and prosecution. This case is unlike other cases we typically prosecute. Michael Douglas Brambles was identified by Ventura County authorities back in 1994 within months of the alleged Ventura County sexual assault and robbery and charged accordingly in our county. However, by that time, he was already being prosecuted by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office for 18 separate armed robberies, some of which included violent sexual assaults. In 1996, Brambles was convicted by way of jury trial of 18 counts of armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, as well as multiple forcible sex crimes, including forcible rape, forcible oral copulation, and forcible digital penetration. The jury also found true that in the commission of these offenses, he used a handgun. He was sentenced by the LA County Superior Court judge to a term of 102 years in state prison. Based on the law and that 102-year sentence, a decision was made by our office in 1998 to dismiss our outstanding case because there was no practical or useful purpose in pursuing a separate prosecution against someone who we expected would spend the rest of his life behind bars. SW agreed with that decision, recognizing that she would not have to relive her trauma on the witness stand and that justice had already been achieved through the lengthy sentence. But as Sheriff Fryhoff mentioned, the law changed, and so did SW's ability to achieve justice. In 2018, a new California law granted prison inmates who had served 25 years of continuous incarceration and were over the age of 60 with the opportunity to seek elder parole. Under pressure from federal court decisions to lower the prison population and to address what was considered to be inadequate mental and health care, the legislature created this new mechanism for early release. directing the Board of Parole Hearings to look at very specific factors, among others, the age of the inmate, the years of continuous incarceration, their risk of future offenses should they be released, and whether or not they were in a position of diminished physical capacity. Brambles was a beneficiary of this new law, and he was granted parole in 2020. At that parole hearing, he specifically denied committing any other sexual assault offenses other than those for which he was convicted of in LA County. As Sheriff Fryhoff mentioned, the sexual assault kit in this case was tested as part of a federal Department of Justice grant, otherwise known as SAKI, the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, a countywide effort involving the Sheriff's Department and all police agencies to go back 5 decades and test each and every kit. In doing so, we discovered that Brambles had been granted parole and was now free in society. Upon learning of this, our office contacted SW, and our investigators approached her and asked whether or not she would be willing to go the distance and seek justice on behalf of her crime and be willing to hold the perpetrator accountable. She answered emphatically, yes, she would. We now seek to hold Michael Douglas Brambles accountable for his alleged actions in Ventura County in 1994. Without SW's courage, her bravery, and her strong resolve, we would not be here today. Despite the passage of time, more than 3 decades, and the long road ahead, SW is committed to seeking accountability and to holding Michael Brambles accountable for the offenses of 32 years ago. And so are we. Thank you, SW. Sheriff Fryhoff and I will now answer questions. Erik.
Hey there. First of all, is this a novel situation with a dismissed prior filed charge? And does that raise any kind of legal quagmire for pursuing it now, even though it was begun some years back?
We do not believe it does. He was not convicted in 1996 and thereafter. The case was dismissed. So we believe, based on the case law and existing California statute, that we can revive the offense, and that is exactly what we have done.
And were the victims in LA notified when he was being released? Because aren't there mechanisms where people are supposed to get a heads up that this was happening?
We believe they were. When there are victims and there is a parole date, those victims, by law, are notified of the upcoming release date and also given an opportunity to speak at the Board of Parole hearings. So while we were not a party to that hearing and it was not our case, we do believe, based upon current practice and standard, that they would have been notified. Lance?
Obviously not a typical criminal, if there's such a thing, but can you talk about his background with the LAPD?
He began with the LAPD in 1971 and was part of the LAPD until 1994. He retired during the midst of this 4 or 5 month crime spree. He was part of the organized intelligence unit. He also worked Vice in Hollywood. He had a career of using what we call informants, and he turned on his badge, his oath to the public, and his duty to uphold and serve. If anyone knows about the trauma that these type of crimes inflict on victims, it's a police officer, a detective. Their inability to no longer sleep at night. The fact that because of what happened to them, they can no longer have relationships with others. The fear of going into a building alone, the night tremors and sweats, the terror of having a gun in your face while someone's demanding money or worse. So these were serious offenses, and as I mentioned, the offense in Ventura County is alleged only. He is presumed innocent until proven otherwise, but we are determined to pursue justice on behalf of SW in Ventura County.
Do we think he might be linked in the broken case?
None that we know of in Ventura County, but as Sheriff Fryhoff mentioned, we are always seeking additional information, further leads, which is why we are showing his booking photo from yesterday.
Did this incident happen before he retired in 1994, and also the fact that he's a registered sex offender, did that help you find him now?
To answer your first question, the alleged offense in this case took place in April. He retired from the LAPD the month prior in March. What allowed us to get to this point is not so much his sex registration status, because indeed, you're correct, he is a registered 290 offender, but the fact that we test each and every one of these sexual assault kits, even those that resulted in convictions. So the fact that we were able to learn of the hit against Brambles in testing the sample, and then discover in doing so that he had been released, brought us to this point today. Essentially, what happened is a case was closed, and due to the sexual assault kit initiative, we've been able to breathe new life and hope into it.
So, sir, that sexual assault kit that you referenced, that was SW's sexual assault kit, and it was retested as part of the initiative. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So there was initial DNA evidence in 1994. Obviously, in the course of 32 years, the science and the technology expands exponentially. So as part of this federal grant, which the sheriff and I mentioned, we were awarded money from the federal government to go back to the 1970s and test and analyze rape kits. So that's exactly what we did in this case, utilizing evidence that was collected from the crime scene of that gift boutique store. So when we collected that evidence, tested it in recent time, we were able to learn that it matched or hit against Michael Douglas Brambles. When we found that match or hit, we therein discovered he had been released. This came at great shock and was deeply troubling and upsetting, because we understood from the history of this case that he would still be incarcerated serving that 102-year sentence.
What was he doing at the Santa Maria?
I want to finish off what the DA said about that question about the sexual assault kits. We're testing all the kits. And even last year, we had a case where the person was found to be innocent, and that person was notified. They had already served their sentence, had been convicted, and they were a registered sex offender. And so the ability to go back and use today's technology for things that were not available so many years ago is helping us to be able to establish who the correct offender was, and if there was any wrongdoings done or the wrong person was convicted, that we make that right now. But in this case, it proved, once again, that this sample matches Michael Brambles. So just everybody knows we're testing every kid.
Two more?
Sorry, Lance, you had your question again?
Just asking what Brambles was doing at the Santa Maria. Retired or was he working?
We believe he was retired.
All right, thank you, everyone. That QR goes back to the recorder.